pause. We'll give it 1 more minute, then we'll get going. Gary, I think I've met everyone on the call, but if you don't know, my name is Kirsty. I'll be working through the presentation today. We've got Gary on the line. He's going to man any questions you may have. So please just pop them into the Q&A or onto the chat, and he'll answer them for you. At the end of the session, we'll also have some time to delve into any other questions that may come up. We're super excited to introduce Signals to all of you on the call today. We'll just give it a couple more seconds. Actually, I think we can go. Gary?
Yeah, let's give it a go.
All right, let's get going. So what's on the agenda today? We're going to start with the big idea. What is Signals? And you can't really talk about Signals without talking about the financial fire drills. So we're going to work through that in a bit more detail today. We'll go into the application live and I'll take you through Signals, and then we'll end off with just how you get support and the resources you need from us, and answer any questions that we maybe didn't get to throughout the presentation today. So what is the big idea? We understand the importance of client conversations, and we know that that's really where clients experience the value from financial planning, is through those conversations. So we looked at, can we take the asset map design philosophy of Simple Rich and use it to interpret the data we collect at the highest level and be able to reflect that back to a household to show them whether they're in a good position financially. So that's the premise behind it. And like I said, you can't talk about Signals without talking about the 6 L's or the financial fire drills. Now, asset map is about enabling your process. We know that different practices, you all have different processes that you take clients through as part of your client engagement. Asset map is about enabling that, enabling your advisor insights and showing that when reflecting it to a client. Just recently, Adam Holt, the CEO and founder of Asset Map, was on a podcast in the US with a planner called James Vanner. And he said, asset map to him is importing complexity and exporting simplicity. And I really love that line. I think it really encompasses what asset map is trying to achieve. But this framework that we're going to go through today, the 6 L's or financial fire drills, we use both terms, really comes from this idea that we've all been through a fire drill. Now, I'm sure you've all been through a fire drill. I know I've had my fair share of fire drills. And the purpose of those is to really understand, if something were to go wrong, you want to be able to give all the stakeholders comfort in knowing that we have a plan if something goes wrong. This is the steps that we're going to take. This is who you call on for support. And the idea behind this framework is, can we take that thinking of a fire drill and apply it to financial planning? And these 6 L's that you see on the page are the 6 events that could potentially derail a household's financial picture. And by working through this framework with the household, with the family, we can unpack and ensure there is a plan in place should one of these events happen. So I'm going to work through each of them now. The first one is liquidity. And that's what would happen if you as a family had a need to access, where you needed to access funds quickly. Now, I think a few years ago, this was sort of a harder concept to relate to, that now that we've all gone through a global pandemic and gone through COVID, it's far more relatable. We know that these things happen in an instant, things change, and you need to be able to have a buffer for a period of time and be able to access those funds really quickly. So the first one, liquidity, is about asking the client that question. If something happens and you lose your job tomorrow, is there a way for you to access funds and access them quickly? Do you have savings, emergency savings or savings that are liquid that you can access? Or could a family member potentially help in a situation like that? Can you access cheap debt, should something like that happen? But it's really about unpacking. Is there a plan? What is the plan? Will it suffice? The next one we're looking at is long-term disability. Somebody in the household becomes disabled. Do we have a plan in place? What is the impact of that on the family? Now, a lot of the time, we hear clients will say, well, through my employer, I have protection against disability. But we know when you unpack that, it's not always efficient. So it's about really just asking, what is the plan? And then saying, okay, great. If that's the plan, let's work with that and see, is that going to be effective? Or do we need to have other arrangements as well? Same with loss of life. If there's a premature death in the family, what is the plan? We would need to cover that income that that person was bringing into the household. What other things would we need to look at? Now, loss of life is one that we could really spend a whole webinar talking about just this one aspect. Now as we delve into it, in more detail, it's things like, where are all the documents? Who's looking after that? Where's the person's passwords for all their social media, as an example? We could really go into that in great depth. But the first step is just unpacking, is there a plan if someone in the household passes away? And what do we need to do? What are the steps we need to take? Long-term care, this talks to if someone in the family falls ill, has something like an illness, cancer, something like that. Again, what is the impact? Do we need care for that person? Would that person have to stop working for that period? What impact would that have? How do we ensure that we have the things in place there? Longevity, we know that clients are living longer. So we know that we're saving for retirement, but is it enough if we live longer than we expected to live? And the last one, legacy. This really speaks to, it's all encompassing around, is there a will in place? Are trusts that need to be in place? What about beneficiaries? Is it up to date? Is everything in order? Just really looking at all the legal side and aspect of that to say, do we understand what legacy these clients want to leave? And is everyone on the same page with that and knows what the steps are for that? Now, I love this 6Ls framework because I think it gives a great way of taking a client's conversation from asset map into target maps or in-depth planning, because it's a way of almost gaining permission from the client to say, here's your asset map, your picture with everything you have on it. But now how do we get permission to delve in a little bit in more depth and unpack these 6 events? And using this framework is a great way of enabling that conversation. And how planners use it in practice is they'll often, instead of going to the client and saying, this is what you need to do in the event of death, they actually show them their asset map and say, we're going to apply this framework now, but we're going to review these 6 things that could potentially derail this plan. Tell me what your plan is in the event of this happening. So in other words, tomorrow you lose your job unexpectedly. Show me on this map where you're going to get liquidity from to cover that. How many months would you need it for? What period would that look like? So just by putting the map in front of the clients and applying that framework, asking the client, they're already taking ownership. This is their plan. These are the things that they have in place. Because often clients have an idea in their mind. If this happens, we'll do this, we'll take funds from here, we'll access those funds. But just taking note of that, taking note of what the client's plan is a great way of saying, okay, now I understand what your plan is around these things. Let me go in and into target maps and show you whether that plan is sufficient enough or whether we need to do other things. And it is through this engagement, just on 6Ls, there is a report available in Asset Map. So if you go into a client's household, you can select reports. You'll see there's a 6L report. It'll have your branding on. It'll also have the household's name on it. And you can use this report by either sending it to a client prior to the engagement and just working through these things, asking them to work through it as a family before your session, or you can work through it with the client. And you can see on this form, it asks questions like, is there a plan, yes or no? Do you think it needs to be modified? And the client can just jot down a couple of sentences. What's the plan in their mind? Giving them the ability to reflect. What is the plan for their family? From there, we can take the outcome of this and work through target maps to see, is that plan on track? Just to show you an example of what a completed one would look like, you can even get the client to sign and date it. And it's another way of just showing I've worked through everything. I've asked all the questions across these different areas. All right, so let's take a look at this household. So we have the Young family, Neil and Lauren Jetson, and let's take a look at what they have in place already. We can see that Neil's got income that he's receiving as well as a rental income. He's built up some assets over time. He's got a couple of retirement funds, some discretionary funds, as well as a loan that's still outstanding. If we flip over to Lauren's side, we can see she's also earning income. She's also got retirement funds, discretionary, and a loan that's still in place. We can see they've got a couple of properties together and still bond on their primary residence, and they've built up some insurance over time. So the idea of signals is, can we take this information? Can we apply algorithms to this to create a predictive model that's going to take this information that sits inside of AssetMap and predict whether a client or a household can financially weather those 6 events that we spoke about? Can they work through that? And what Signals does is it looks at these 6 events across the household based on the data that's in AssetMap, and it tells the household you are red, green, or amber across these 6 events. And it does that by looking at the client's ages, what their income is at the moment, how much savings they've built up in retirement savings, in discretionary savings, what insurances they've built up over time. It looks at all of those things and then reflects whether the household is red, green, or amber across these 6 events. So it's almost bringing that financial fire drills to life. The 6th one, just to note, is a little bit different from 6Ls, which is a broader conversation. There we talk about things like, is the will in place? Is there trust if there needs to be? Is all legal documentation in place? From a signal point of view, because you can't really calculate if the will and that's in place, we've refined the calculation part to look at, is there short-term cover and what's the ratio of that cover to the client's assets and liabilities? So, what's the ratio and what's the risk there? But the idea with this signal and all signals is to open up conversation, to work through it with the client and say, okay, this one's showing up as red. Let's delve in and understand why it's red. How do we unpack it? And how do we move the client forward? So without further ado, let's take a look at a live example. I'm going to flip over. Okay, you can see AssetMap picker, just checking. Thumbs up, okay. So here we have the Joseph's family. And similarly, I've kept it quite high level, simple picture. We can see on the left, Kyle's got an income that he's earning annually. He's also built up some retirement funds and discretionary savings. On the right, we can see Mary's got an income. She's got a retirement fund and discretionary savings. At the top, we can see they've got some life cover, income protection, and critical illness cover. And below, we can see this properties and a bond. So again, we're taking this information, applying these algorithms, and on the left now, you'll see there's a new icon here of a robot that I can select, and it's now showing me for this household. So I'm just going to refresh this quickly. Logged in and out. So good. It's showing for this household if the client is amber, green, or red across these different areas. So here we can see for this household, liquidity is amber. That means they have some provision should there be a liquidity event, but according to the algorithm, it's not enough to make it green. We can see long-term disability is green, saying, based on that, they have sufficient provision. Loss of life is showing up as red. Long-term care is green. And at the bottom, we've got longevity and legal liability, both showing as red. Now, this is not scientific. So just because it's red doesn't mean there's definitely an issue. And just because it's green doesn't mean it's perfect. The idea behind this is it gives you an indication, and it gives us a way of engaging with the client, almost showing them a mirror of, based on the things that we've captured, this is what it's telling us. And it gives us permission to delve in a bit deeper and unpack, why is the signal red? What can we do differently? So for example, if we look at loss of life here, I can click on the details of the signal, and it gives me a bit of information around what it's calculating, what it's looking at that I can share with the client. but it also gives me the ability to run a target map directly from the signal. So I can, in this case, I want to unpack why is loss of life red. I can select that, select Kyle and Mary, and create target maps for Kyle and Mary. And what that's going to do is we can see now it's showing me that in the event of Kyle's death, they are 20% funded, in the event of his death, to ensure that they're okay. And Mary, it's 25% funded. But now I can go and unpack that a little bit. So for those of you who haven't spent a lot of time on target maps, it starts with, what does this client want? And you can see the models put based on settings. It's already got an answer here, but now we're going to work through it with the client. So the model is saying, if something happens to Kyle, the family would need to replace 70% of what Kyle is currently earning, which is $420,000. From now, we assume death happens today, till 90, when Kyle would have been 90, increasing at a cost of living adjustment of 6%, so inflation of 6. In addition to that, it's saying there's debt in the household, and they would want to clear that debt in the event of Kyle's death. There's also final expenses of $150,000 that they would like to make sure there's funding for, and $525,000 in emergency reserve. So that's just to say they've got enough for the first few months to get through that. Now, these are just settings. You would now sit with the client and unpack that. Does this seem right for you, Kyle? Would you require, if something happened to you, would your family need $420,000? Kyle might say, no, they'll be absolutely fine with 30,000 Rand a month, or actually I need 600,000 Rand a year. Then you can update any of these amounts and it will update the plan. You can also exclude any items and add any desired cash flow that this client may need in the event of death. So that's the first step. What does this client want? The next step is to say, okay, in the event of Kyle's death, we know what they would need as a family to be able to sustain it financially, but what do they have in place already? And here we can see that we've allocated the life cover that Kyle has, which is this 3 million amount. And that will be used to fund some of that income. But what else does Kyle have? Kyle also has the savings fund that could be used. Kyle also has a pension preservation fund that would go to the family that they could use to supplement that income. And Kyle has an employer fund of 3 million. So I allocate that all to this goal. What we can see here is based on what Kyle would like for his family in the event of his death, they are 45% funded based on the things that they have already. The difference would be the 7 million here. Now, I can work through different options with the client and say, well, we could change the income requirement. Maybe we don't need the emergency reserve. Maybe there's other assets we can allocate to this, or perhaps we need to take out additional life cover to fund the shortfall. For this illustration, I'm going to assume we're proposing more life cover. So let's say in this example, I propose an additional 7 million in life cover for Kyle. I can then pop back into Asset Map and create an insurance block to say we are proposing additional life cover for Kyle to the amount of 7 million. Okay, I can create that. Now we can go look at Mary's plans. I can go into Mary's target map. Sorry, before I do that, let me just open up Kyle's. I can now allocate that proposed life cover sitting at the bottom here, and we can see this is now going to change to just about 100% funded. Now we can work through that exact same process with Mary to say, if something were to happen to Mary, what would the family require? Here you can see it's again starting off at 70% income for a period of time, covering debt again, having some emergency funding. Again, I can edit any of these fields to really personalize what the family would need if something were to happen to Mary. Next step would be to look at what does Mary have in place already. We know that Mary's got this life cover of 3 million, but again, she has some investments that we could allocate to this goal. So we could allocate the tax-free savings that Mary has, as well as her retirement annuity. Again, we're 39% funded and there's a shortfall of about 7.2 million. This is where we'd work through different options with Mary around what we could do differently. But let's say we go ahead and propose additional life cover for Mary as well. I'm going to create that much the same way. So propose life cover. And let's say it's 7 million in Mary's case. Okay. Once again, I can go back into target maps. I can allocate that proposed life cover and show the impact on this plan for Mary. So now we can see, okay, she's 98% funded. And now if I pop back into signals, because I've added those proposed covers there, we can see the signal has now changed from red to green. So that's the process that Signals enables. You can show the client their asset map, everything they have and where it is, and work through that engagement. Then you can use Signals as a way of saying, let's look across these 6 areas and unpack where they're red, green, and amber. This one is potentially red. Let's unpack that a little bit more and see, is it really red, or are there things that we can do differently? You can unpack that with a client and use target maps to really delve into that conversation. You can also add notes into Signals. So you can put a note in here saying it was red, we proposed and implemented this additional cover that's now changed it to, Carrie, am I still on? There we go, okay. Thought I lost you there. We can add in comments and really indicate what the process was that we went through, why the signal is now green. We can also put comments in on signals that are perhaps amber that we're not doing anything about now. But maybe next year we come back and we say, you know what, we're gonna work on this one now. Last year we worked on the red signals. We wanted to get them, in the clients in the right position there. But this one we're going to focus on next year. And so you can always refer back. What are the notes that we made? Which are the signals that we're tackling now? Okay. And then, of course, from there, you can delve into any one of these, whether it's, on the longevity side, you could run a retirement target map to unpack why this one is red and what you can do differently. When it comes to liquidity, you can run a custom target map to see what sort of income would this family feel comfortable with. Is it 6 months worth? Is it 9 months worth of income? And how on track are we to achieving that? Just to talk through who has access to Signals. Signals is part of our Asset Map Professional offering. So that's where you have access to Asset Map like you're seeing now. You'll also have Signals where you can see across these different events, as well as target maps where you can run these different maps to see how on track a client is across these different events and what they can do differently. Some of you on the call may be on Asset Map Essentials subscription, which is, the Asset Map section, but doesn't include Signals and target maps. That's typically if you're using it in conjunction with other models. We have turned Signals on for everybody, so you can get a sense of, is this something that would be of value? Is this something you want to bring into your client's engagement? So if you don't have access to target maps and you want to explore this, please just let us know. We can take you through it and work through the options. How do you get support from us? As always, you've got the WhatsApp groups. Please just let us know if you have any questions on there. We can jump onto the group with you or jump onto a Zoom call and work through any questions and also just work through how you would bring this into your process. I wanted to highlight that we also have in-app support. So you'll see if you're in the Asset Map application, there's a little button on the bottom right. You can send messages in there and we can respond to any questions you may have. We've also got a support center within Asset Map. You can see it here where it says support documentation. You can select that and search for anything. It'll show you videos, articles, and just a lot more resources around any topic inside of Asset Map.